The Starfleet life with the USS Dauntless. Are you brave enough to be a Starfleet officer? Do you have what it takes? Greetings, everybody. I'm Admiral Swart, Commanding Officer, USS Dauntless, and this is the briefing with the Admiral for Stardate -268637.1. I am the Admiral in question, and today we're going to be talking about growing away teams. Now, what does that mean? Let's just do a quick catch-up. So away teams are a metaphor that we use here on the USS Dauntless. It's the way that we classify members of groups that are in different places. So although we are headquartered here in Cape Town, South Africa, we have members in various other places around the world, and those typically cluster into groups. Each group is called an away team. They belong to specific sectors, and they are named according to letters in the Greek alphabet. So here in Cape Town, the members in this area are called Tau Team because we're in Tau Sector. Up in Joburg, South Africa, those are called Alpha Team. In Bloemfontein, they're called Iota Team. Each separate city, members in that group are given that a name along those lines. Then the ranking officer in each sector, in each away team, is the team leader for that away team. So these away teams give us a structure whereby we can organize in-person activities in all of our various locations where we have active members. Unfortunately, there are plenty of places where we have active sectors where there is only 1 or 2 or 3 active members, relatively small away teams. And a thing that I get a lot of questions from people in that predicament is, how do I go about recruiting new members in my local area? How can we start having the same kind of in-person activities that we see you guys having over there in Tau Sector? Now, I'm not a professional expert in this kind of thing. It's just something that I've been doing for a long time, and I've had a lot of practice. I've tried lots of different things. I've had some things work for me. I've had some things not work for me. Things work for a while and then stop working. Things that never worked suddenly start working. That kind of thing. I have some experience in this arena, so I'm going to try to impart some of the experience that I have to you guys in this area. Chief Kotza says, more than 10,000 hours, you're an expert. You might be right. Maybe I should go and apply for my honorary degree from somewhere. But anyway, before we get started, I'd just like to welcome everybody that's here. I see Captain van Grienen. I see Colonel Joubert, Chief Kotze, of course, Ensign Sneeman. I see Lieutenant Kemmerly and Apprentice Bam. Welcome, everybody, for joining us. If anybody else joins us as we go, I will try to remember to give everybody a shout out. If you're watching this after the fact and you're not able to ask questions in real time, that's perfectly acceptable. You're welcome to drop a comment on YouTube or Facebook or anywhere else where you find this video. You can also send me a private message, again, on YouTube or Facebook or Discord, email, wherever is suitable for you, and I'll do my best to answer your question either directly or in a future webinar video like this one. All right, let's get on to some material. So what do you need when you want to recruit, when you want to assemble a team? You need a basic setup of equipment, right? That's typical of Starfleet. We need to be prepared. We need to have the right equipment. And the first thing that you need is, as you might expect, a uniform. So uniforms are more than just a fun thing that we like to dress up in order to feel closer to the characters that we see on screen. They are professional attire that we earn the right to wear here in Starfleet. But in this particular context, what they are is a kind of walking advertisement to the kinds of people that we're interested in recruiting to join us here in the Dauntless. So what we want to be doing is adorning our bodies and becoming that walking billboard as much as possible. Now you could do that by wearing a Star Trek t-shirt that, has some kind of Starship Enterprise on it or something like that. That's not the end of the world. But a uniform sets a slightly different tone and tells the person looking at you a little bit more about what we are as an organization, about who the Dauntless is, that we are a little bit more serious than that. We're not just Star Trek fans. We're an organized group with structures and titles and a way of doing things that necessitates the use of a uniform as opposed to just a casual t-shirt. And the uniform that I recommend for this kind of activity, for recruiting people, especially if you're going to be doing it in person, which is what we're talking about here as an away team member, is this uniform, the STU, the Class B uniform. So the reason I recommend this one is because it is the most conspicuous uniform in our uniform set. It's the one that's the most recognizable. People who have any kind of familiarity with Star Trek beyond just sort of the most recent couple of shows, or perhaps just the original series, if they know Star Trek at all, they will recognize this uniform. If not the actual specifics of it, they'll at least recognize the com badge, they'll know what it means, and they'll understand that it's a reference to Star Trek, and they'll be pleased by that. That has been my experience, at least. So you want to try and put together a Class B uniform and SDU. Now, remember, here on the website, we have a description of what specifications you want to build your uniform to. Now, this is, of course, now we had an episode about uniforms not long ago, and building an SDU is not something that is cheap or quick. It's going to cost you money and it's going to take some time. So if you don't already have one built as of today, you're going to need to make another plan, and we'll go through some options momentarily about that. But this is the ideal that you want to be putting together, is one of these, not only for recruiting, but just generally speaking, for being a member of the Dauntless. The SDU is the gold standard for the uniforms that we recommend people wearing. So I'd recommend getting onto putting together a plan that will allow you to assemble an SDU in the foreseeable future, bearing in mind, of course, that it will take time and it will cost money. But you're not on your own. There are members of the Dauntless crew. There's the quartermaster, and there's the rest of the crew who've already built their uniforms in the past, who can offer you tips and tricks and advice on where you can go to purchase a uniform, or who you can speak to have one made for you. There's a wealth of information available to you at your fingertips here in the Dauntless crew. If you visit the Quartermaster channel, you can chat to people there, ask questions. If you visit the QM store, also in Discord, you can find some of the components of the uniform that are available for sale there. That can be done. It won't be quick, won't be cheap, but it's a good idea to start working on that project if you haven't already. But what if you don't already have one now? So you don't have one of these uniforms today. What can you do instead? Well, there are alternatives. You have, of course, the Class C uniforms, the leisure uniform, and this is fine. It's a lot less conspicuous, especially to non-Dauntless members. It's less instantly recognizable, but that doesn't mean that it's not worth going with, especially if you manage to adorn it with some of the accessories. So if you've got the insignia sleeve patch, maybe you slap a com badge on it, it becomes a little bit more recognizable to somebody who might spot you out in the world. So an LU is not the end of the world. If you don't have an SDU, that's pretty much the only uniform you have at your disposal. So that's a solid second choice. But what about situations where a uniform isn't appropriate? Let's say you're going recruiting to an event where wearing a uniform might not fit the dress code, or it might not be the right kind of time or place to wear it. I'm not going to list examples right now. I'm sure we'll go through as we go through the lecture today. We'll find some examples of that. What about something that's a bit less conspicuous but still recognizable? Well, what I use for situations like that is something like this. So this is a little badge, a little pin. It's a brooch. It's not a com badge, but it is a little Star Trek badge. It's a little lapel pin. So when I'm wearing a civilian outfit, I will pin one of these to my jacket lapel. I picked it up on wish.com. I think it cost 80 Rand, including shipping. It's not very high quality, but it's fine. It's perfectly adequate. It does the trick. It's recognizable to people who are looking at you. If they know what Star Trek is, they will recognize that insignia, and they will know to begin a conversation with you about that. So something like that doesn't have to be this one exactly, but if you can find yourself a little lapel pin or some other medallion or brooch that you can adorn yourself with that people will associate with Star Trek, that's a good idea for wearing with a civilian outfit. If you are required to wear a different uniform in a given situation, you don't want to be adding extra insignia to that uniform. It's typically not appropriate. In that case, there's not much you can do about it. That's all there is to say about that. But in situations where you can adorn yourself physically with some kind of physical manifestation of Star Trek in general, or the Dauntless in particular, you should always take that opportunity in order to do so, because you want to be advertising yourself physically to the people around you as a Star Trek fan, if you possibly can. All right, so uniform is the first item on the thing. What about feeling shy? So a lot of people, if you've never worn a proper uniform out in public before, you might feel a little bit shy about it. You think that people will look at you funny as you're walking past. Yes, that's going to happen. Unfortunately, there's no miracle cure for that. You're just going to have to do it. Lieutenant Kimberly says, "Be a rebel. We all know that Starfleet insignia supersedes the rest. Um, in a lot of circumstances, you're probably right, and it's probably possible to sneak a Starfleet comm badge somewhere or a lapel pin somewhere into your uniform, even if you work in a different profession that requires a different uniform. But if you can't, there are sneaky ways of sneaking Star Trek stuff into it. One idea that I've heard people talk about is carrying a Star Trek novel. So you should be able to, in most bookshops, pick up a one of the novels that's about Star Trek that has a nice conspicuous Star Trek cover. If you carry that in your hand, you don't even have to read it necessarily. But if you're carrying it around, you're carrying a Star Trek object that people might recognize and might serve as a catalyst for conversation. So yes, wearing a uniform out in public, you need to get over the shyness of it. That's simply how it's going to have to be. And if you need practice, I recommend putting on your uniform and going to the local mall when you do your shopping on a Saturday morning, preferably month end when it's nice and busy, and just walking around in your uniform. Go and have a cup of coffee by yourself or with friends. You're going to get a lot of funny looks, and you're going to get used to it pretty quickly. That's just how that is. Captain Van Kernen says a bat'leth would be a nice accessory. Yes, it would be a nice accessory. Unfortunately, it is illegal to carry a large weapon like that, at least in South Africa and probably in a lot of other jurisdictions. I would recommend against it. I actually have a nice lapel pin. I wonder where that is now. That is a little miniature bat'leth. That was a gift from Admiral Donahoe. I wonder what I've done with that. That must be around here somewhere. So not an actual bat'leth, but a symbolic bat'leth might not be a bad idea. You don't want to go something that is too obscure. So then people who have a familiarity with Star Trek but might not know the minutiae of it, they might not recognize the bat'leth itself. So a delta is a solid option, or maybe like a Vulcan hand symbol or something like that. Something that's relatively easy recognizable. So yes, moving on. So we don't want to we want to adorn ourselves as clearly as possible and as extensively as possible with Star Trek insignia or with Dauntless uniform if we possibly can, without breaking any other rules or social taboos. And you want to get used to the shyness of it. You want to go out in public in your uniform as often as you possibly can so that you just get used to it. People are going to look at you funny. They're going to make jokes. That's just how that is. That's what people are like. Instance Neyman says, I'm the only one on away missions in my sector at the moment, and many civilians will laugh and look at you funny when you mention you're on an away mission. But in the end, they respect you're working towards something. The giggles aren't so bad. I 100% agree. The funny looks and the jokes, that's just part of it. And if you take it in good humor and you practice giving it back as well as you get it, then everybody is happy with it, and it can become a positive interaction instead of a negative interaction. You don't have to receive it as mockery. You can receive it as surprise and people who are interested and admiring what you're doing, and they're curious about it and they'd like to know about it. And while they might crack jokes, that's just part of how South Africans interact with things that are unfamiliar. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily ridiculing you. They're just processing that in the way that makes sense to them. And if you can take that in good humor, so much the better. That is actually one of the first steps towards building a relationship with those people, which is really what this is all about. It's about building relationships. The next piece of equipment you're going to need for recruiting people is patience. There's just no way around it. You're going to have to be very, very patient. And this is one of the principal reasons why we say that, let's get rid of this. We actually don't need this here. Why we say that one of the three pillars of being a Starfleet officer is dedication. It's doing the same thing over and over again over time because it matters. And patience, there's no underestimating the importance of patience when it comes to recruiting. It's going to take time. It might take years before you recruit your second away team member. Sorry for the bad news. If you thought it was going to happen quickly, it probably won't. I mean, it might. If you already have friends who are interested in joining and you can sign them up quickly, so much the better. But be prepared for it to be a long, long process, and expect to spend many, many hours on your own by these away missions, waiting for opportunities to strike where you can recruit new crew members. But as long as you keep trying consistently over time, over potentially years, eventually it will happen. Patience is the most important piece of equipment, possibly even more important than a uniform when it comes to recruiting. The third piece of equipment you need is, oh, I shouldn't have clicked away from this. I actually need this back. Okay, the third piece of equipment you need is a pad. A pad is a personal access and display device, which is what we call a smartphone or a tablet or any internet connected device really is what you need. A pad is a good one because it's portable and you'll be able to carry it with you. So you'll need a pad on the one hand to do some research, and we'll go into what kinds of research you'll be needing momentarily, but you'll also need to load it up with certain assets that will assist you when you are on the ground doing recruiting efforts. And what assets do I mean? So we've produced some materials that you can carry with you on your person that can assist you with getting people on board to the USS Dauntless. One of those is this. We call this a digital flashcard. So this is just an image that has a QR code on it. If you can show somebody the screen of your phone and it has this image on it, they can scan this QR code with their phone, which will then take them directly to the homepage of our website where they can learn more about the USS Dauntless. This is an invaluable piece of recruiting material, and if you have this on your pad, on your phone or your tablet, in a place where you can find it quickly and easily so you can display it to people when you meet them in person, it means you don't have to carry anything physically with you other than your phone, which you were carrying with you anyway, and that can provide somebody with all the information they need relatively quickly. So you would use this as a supplement to a conversation. When you're having a chat with somebody about the Dauntless, you can flash them this code at the appropriate moment in the conversation, which can then lead them to a place where they can learn more about us and even sign up for the Dauntless if they're interested in doing so. If you're not comfortable with doing this, or if you want to have a physical accompaniment to this, we also provide a printable business card, which has the same QR code on it. You can find these, by the way, on the resources channel in the USS Dauntless Discord. You can download these images and PDFs, etc. So this printable business card is something that you can do exactly that. You can print it and carry some with you in your pocket if you like. I would, before using one of these, I would recommend being cognizant of the circumstances in which you're going to use it. I recommend against using physical cards when going to something like a convention. The reason being that when people are at conventions and they are speaking to people and getting to know people, they will take a million business cards. Every store they go to, every person they speak to is giving them a business card, and that business card just goes in the bag. And then when they get home, that bag goes on the table. 6 months later, they find their bag unopened and it goes in the bin, unfortunately, including your business card. They probably haven't made any connection from there. Lieutenant Kemmerly says, I was recruited via a flashcard. It was effective on me at least. Yes, that's true. I remember that interaction. That was very effective. So it works. It's not going to necessarily recruit every single person that you meet, but some of the people that you meet who are interested in joining will find that a useful channel to do so. The physical business card is not always the right choice. It's not the end of the world to have some of these sitting in your car or in your handbag or something like that if you do find an opportunity to slip them out. But just be mindful of the circumstances in which you're distributing the physical business cards and consider when the digital flash card might be more appropriate. So when they scan their code and they go to the front page of the website, they will also then be directed to the recruitment form. If circumstances allow, it might not be the worst idea for you to have a larger pad like a tablet, an iPad or something like that with you that is open on the recruitment form to the Dauntless, so that if you're chatting to somebody who wants to join, they can sign up there and then and initiate the process of onboarding. It saves them having to look it up on their own device. They can ask you all the questions in the moment. It's not always feasible or practical to do this, but if you're in the circumstances where it might be, this is not a terrible idea. Just one thing you need to please pay attention to: the recruitment form can read your Google account on your browser. So if you are signed into a Google account, it will pull your email address through. So if you're opening this form, please do it in an incognito tab so that the person filling it in has to add their Gmail account or their email account to the form instead of it pulling through yours. Otherwise, it might confuse us on the recruiting end when we initiate the onboarding process for somebody who is already a crew member. So just double check that when you're doing that, but that's not a bad idea to have this form up and open so that you can assist with recruiting in the moment. All right, so once you've got this equipment assembled, you want to start making plans for how to go about recruiting. And you want to assemble what I call a target list. A target, I don't mean target as in person, I mean target as in social networks. So within any social network, you have people who are exchanging communication and information with each other. And as long as you are able to insert yourself as a piece of information, as a source of information into one of those social networks, then word about you can spread through that network. So what you want to try and do is establish as many different social networks as possible who have people in them that might be the kinds of people who would want to join the Dauntless. Now, let's think about that concept for a moment quickly. Is what kinds of people do you think might want to join the Dauntless? Okay, this is distracting us again. Let's transition back there. There we go. What kind of people might want to join the Dauntless? Well, what kind of people are Star Trek fans? There's one easy answer to that question, and that is you. So you are a Star Trek fan. If you are the sort of person who has joined the Dauntless and you're interested in recruiting away team members, then you are the kind of person that we are trying to reach. People like you. And you can ask questions of yourself. What am I interested in? What things do I like to do? Where do I like to go? Who do I like to spend time with? What things am I interested in other than Star Trek that I might want to get engaged in? And that can help you to start to put together your target list, which is uh, uh, social networks, which is typically groups of people that you want to get into contact with that would have interests that might align with yours. We can put it, while we're sitting here, let's put together a basic profile of what a typical Star Trek fan might look like. Somebody who perhaps is interested in science fiction and fantasy, maybe somebody who's interested in science, maybe somebody who's interested in exploration, who are looking at the stars, perhaps creative people who are interested in telling stories, narratives, perhaps people who are interested in indulging in popular culture or gaming. These are all the kinds of people that if they themselves are not interested in Star Trek, they know people who are. Every D&D group has at least one Trekkie at the table. So if you're speaking to somebody who is not a Trekkie, someone in their D&D group probably is a Trekkie. Lieutenant Kimberly says, nerds, got it. Those are the best kind. I was trying to avoid saying the N word, but yes, nerds. That's essentially who we're talking about. Nerds, geeks, dorks. These are the kinds of people who might be interested in joining the Dauntless. So we can assemble a target list of the kinds of people that might be interested in joining. So in your area, in your town, you can start putting together a list of places where people like us might want to go. So, instance name on our second, the N word. Yeah, fair enough. Some of us aren't ashamed of being nerds. So you can assemble a target list of places where people like us might want to go. So comic book stores, game stores, bookstores, libraries. Conventions are an easy one. Not all cities have conventions in them, but if you live in a city that is fortunate enough to have conventions like Comic-Con or maybe smaller conventions, that is an obvious target that you can go to. There are places you can go to find people like this. Other examples: chess clubs, people who play competitive tabletop games; astronomy groups, people who are interested in space; things like HEMA clubs. HEMA is historical European martial arts. These are the nerdiest of the nerdy. Guaranteed you'll find some Trekkies in groups like that. Captain Von Cronin says tabletop peeps. Sadly, on my side, they're already on SFI. That's correct. So people who are into tabletop games, a lot of them would be interested in the kinds of things that we like and might be Star Trek fans as well. So you want to find out where people like that spend time, and then you want to go there. Go there in person, show up, get involved in the activities that they're doing. You don't necessarily have to show up like a sales rep and start spouting the gospel of Star Trek or Gene Roddenberry's dream, although you could do it that way if you wanted to. That's not likely to yield results. What's more likely to happen is just go there and do the things that they do there, which are probably things that you're interested in doing anyway. So if you go there and you show up and you do the things that you do, you're playing D&D or Magic the Gathering, or you're looking at stars or listening to a lecture or playing a few games of chess or talking about comic books, if people learn to recognize you as being the Star Trek person in that group, then they will start to relay that information to other people in their respective networks. So again, the people that you're talking to in those groups, they themselves are not necessarily Star Trek fans, but if they're involved in that community, in that fandom, then they have friends who are, and they will eventually tell that friend, hey, I met this Star Trek guy at D&D the other night. You should come along and meet him. Or he sent me this business card that I thought you might be interested in having. Or he sent me this website. Here you go. Check it out. I'll send it to you on WhatsApp. That's the kind of exchange of information that we are trying to stimulate. But in order to stimulate that, you need to be part of those networks already. And in order to become part of those networks, you need to be conspicuous. People need to know that you are the Star Trek person, and you need to be reliable. You need to be there often enough that they get to know you, they get to trust you, they get to learn that you are a good and decent and reliable person, and that you can be trusted to show up and participate and carry your end of the social interaction. So showing up matters, being conspicuous matters, and building relationships matters. That's for sort of regular events at local gaming stores or bookstores or gaming clubs, so that kind of thing. Single events are a little bit more complicated. So if you're showing up at conventions, that's a one-off interaction that doesn't continue week after week. So you want to maximize that kind of interaction. What wouldn't hurt, and seems to have worked pretty well for us in the past, is if you are able to get in touch with an organizer's group of a local convention and negotiate with them some way of incorporating some Star Trek related content into their schedule. If you can get your name onto their list of speakers as being the Star Trek expert to come and talk about Star Trek things, that is perfect. That's a great way of reaching a relatively large number of potential new recruits in one go without necessarily having to go one by one to interact with and build a relationship with each and every one of those people. Those people are already there because they're interested in the kinds of things that you are interested in. The con organizers have already done the work of informing them about the content and getting them in the room. All you need to do is establish your credentials as an expert in Star Trek and use that to then leverage the initiation of that interaction and that relationship, which will then hopefully lead to them joining the Dauntless after that. That also has worked for us, worked pretty well at Comic Con. Welcome to our new recruits who joined us after meeting us at Comic Con. We're really glad to have you all on board. Um, Right, so consistency is essential. Patience is vital because it's not unlikely that if you're showing up at these events week after week, the people that who are around you are not necessarily going to be interested in Star Trek, and it might take some time for that information to get passed on to their friends who have an interest in Star Trek or who might want to be members of the Dauntless in future. You're going to have to be patient for that. You can't rush it. You can't force it. You just have to establish your relationship and establish your reputation as being a Star Trek person who is reliable and trustworthy and can be relied upon to be there over and over again over time. Right. So I think that about covers it. This has been once again longer than I expected it to be. We have, yes, Lieutenant Kimberly says, that's me. She was one of the ones who joined us from Comic-Con. We're very pleased to have you. Colonel Yobara says, yes, very exciting to have new recruits. Happy to see you on board. Captain Van Kernen says, 30 minutes already? Just about. It's been about 28 minutes. I thought this was going to be a 10-minute episode. That's just how these things go. I always surprise myself by how much I have to say about these kinds of things. But I think that should do it. I think that was everything that I wanted to cover on this topic for today. It feels quite short. It does feel short, doesn't it, compared to our 50-minute episodes? Once again, if you have any more questions about this or any other topic, you're welcome to drop comments on Facebook or Discord or YouTube or wherever, and we can either I can either address your comment directly or we can expand it into a future episode. If you think that there's more information about this topic in particular that could be expanded upon in another episode, I'd love to know what it is that you'd like to know about that. Any specific questions, again, you can address to me directly. Otherwise, we are going to call it at that.